Welcome. My name is Thomas Allen Moon, and I'm the author of Payback: Why the Top 1% Must Invest in the Rest, and How It Can Renew America. I wrote Payback to deal explicitly with an ongoing trend that politicians of all stripes have refused to admit exists. Over the last 40 years, the gap between what it costs to live the American dream and the market income of ordinary workers has widened from a gully to a canyon. This canyon now threatens the future of the middle class, and if nothing is done, Americans with ordinary skills will fall out of the middle class. Payback proposes a tax policy that will enable capitalism not only to save the middle class, but to grow and make it more prosperous. Since Payback digs deeply into the weeds, I've recorded this Q&A to give readers a quick take on it. To make this Q&A easier for readers to digest, I've divided it into 15 sections. Payback is free to read on a website that I've created for the convenience of readers. It's my hope that Payback will contribute to a national dialogue on tax policy that I believe will take place sometime in the next decade. Now let's get started with the Q&A. Part A. If millions of low-wage workers are to pay for their health care, education, and retirement, their after-tax income must be increased. Question. Suppose you're right and the payroll tax is replaced by the personal income tax. Would this solve the problem of low-wage workers not making enough to stay out of poverty? Well, it would go a long way, but more would have to be done, and not by using tax credits. For example, I believe that the politicians should mandate that all businesses, except for very small businesses and hobby businesses, pay all able-bodied adult workers a living wage. Any business that can't pay a living wage isn't a viable business. And any business that can pay a living wage but doesn't is outsourcing to taxpayers the need to provide financial help to its employees. Permitting businesses to pay less than a living wage enriches their owners at the expense of taxpayers. You point out ways that tax preferences and credits lead to a loss of revenue in the system. Let's take a closer look at some of the credits designed to help society. What's wrong with the child credit? It wastes too much money on the unneedy. Couples with incomes of up to $400,000 qualify for a $2,000 tax credit for each dependent child age 16 or under. Those whose income is above the median income of about $60,000 don't need taxpayer help to support their dependent children, while those whose income is below the median wage need more help than the credit provides. As an example, the greatest unmet need for many low-wage workers is for child care for preschoolers. Ending the child credit and using the revenue savings to expand and improve child care for low-wage workers is a better use of public funds than increasing the after-tax income to high-income taxpayers, particularly at a time when the national debt is out of control. So much for the child credit. What's wrong with the EIC? While it's better than nothing, the EIC is seriously flawed in that it corrupts both markets and politics. Corruption is a big word. Taking your charge one point at a time, explain how the EIC corrupts markets. I believe that markets should determine the viability of both businesses and jobs. Neither a business that can't pay its cost of doing business without a taxpayer subsidy, nor a job that isn't worth being paid a living wage is economically viable. By having taxpayers supplement the wages of low-wage workers, the EIC encourages both businesses to pay less than a living wage to increase their profits and employees to work in dead-end jobs that can be lost at any moment. I don't think that taxpayers should subsidize either increasing the profitability of businesses that don't pay a living wage or the prolonging of non-viable jobs. You've explained why you think the EIC corrupts markets. Why do you think it corrupts politics? The EIC invites an unholy alliance between both businesses that hire employees who lack the skills to merit a living wage and these employees who use their political influence to enrich themselves at taxpayers' expense. Increasing the EIC enables businesses to increase their profits by keeping their employees' wages low, while also enabling low-wage employees to increase their after-tax income. This results in politicians, not markets, determining both the profitability of businesses that hire low-wage employees and the after-tax income of low-wage employees. This is a blatant example of a socialistic solution to a problem created by capitalism. Question. You mentioned the S word, socialism. What does socialism have to do with this? A lot more than most people think. Socialism can take many forms, but essentially it refers to a system that uses government intervention rather than market forces to achieve certain public policy goals. Socialism substitutes politicians for markets in determining what gets produced and who can afford to buy it. Substituting politics for markets isn't limited to socialists. It's a practice embraced by many fake capitalists who seek special benefits from politicians anytime they see an opportunity. Tax preferences in general, and the EIC in particular, are all examples of businessmen seeking advantage from politicians that they can't get from markets. As for me, I trust markets more than politicians to determine what should be produced and who can afford to buy it. So if you don't think the EIC is the best way to deal with the growing percentage of able-bodied full-time workers who lack the skills to earn a living wage, then what should be done? Well, raising the wages of these workers can only be remedied by either upgrading their skills or providing them with public sector jobs. The EIC does neither. You suggest two remedies. Explain what you think can be done to upgrade the skills of low-wage workers. This is a thorny issue that involves a harsh truth that few are willing to discuss. While I believe that education and retraining will work for some percentage of underskilled workers, particularly the young, I'm doubtful it'll work for most workers 50 or older. The notion that a 55-year-old laid-off assembly line worker living in rural Iowa can be retrained to work in information technology or become a successful entrepreneur strikes me as fanciful. Even as a skeptic, I would fund retraining programs and private sector apprentice programs if they can show a track record of success. Given my doubts about retraining, I believe that most underskilled workers will have to be placed in public sector jobs. Question: public sector jobs. Does this mean hiring millions more government workers? Yes, specifically this solution would involve hiring the structurally unemployed as public sector workers to fill unmet needs at the local level. Millions of workers lack skills to earn a living wage in the private sector and lack technical skills, making retraining unlikely. Yet what many of these hard-working individuals lack in technical skills, they make up in their life skills and experiences, which could benefit our society if given an outlet. There is much worthwhile work to be done in the public sector in education, law enforcement, healthcare, childcare, the environment, and other public functions. And these workers could both earn a living wage and contribute to improving the quality of life for everyone. I believe that this work would benefit America much more than using the EIC to keep workers in non-viable jobs that aren't worth a living wage. Explain what kind of public sector jobs you're suggesting. I'm suggesting that community service jobs be created to improve the well-being of underserved communities throughout the nation. There are thousands of local governments and nonprofit organizations that can employ these workers to meet unmet public needs. Be more specific. What would these employees do? These workers would be employed in education, law enforcement, healthcare, childcare, parks and recreation, environmental matters, libraries, and other public functions to assist frontline personnel and relieve them of routine administrative tasks and to assist in providing maintenance and security for public facilities. Who would pay for and administer the program? The federal government would provide funding for a grant program in which grants based on need would be made to local governments and nonprofits to hire these employees. Local governments would administer these programs consistent with federal guidelines. How costly would this program be? It would depend on how many underskilled workers are unemployable in the private sector. To the extent that the education system produces or retrains more workers able to earn a living wage in the private sector, the program would cost less. But if the education system fails, it would cost more. It's my hope that over time the educational system will respond and eliminate, or at least dramatically reduce, the need for this program. You worry that the cost of the program might get out of hand. Sure I do, but I see no alternative. No matter what, something must be done with these workers who are unemployable in the private sector. I believe that they and the nation are better off if these workers work in community service jobs rather than by enabling the likes of Amazon and Walmart to hire low-paid warehouse workers and greeters while expecting taxpayers to cover the cost of their unmet needs. Under a community service jobs program, taxpayers, not low-wage employees, would get the benefit of the tax dollars expended on employing the otherwise unemployable to enhance the well-being of their own communities. I think that we now know why you don't think the EIC is the best way to deal with those who lack the skills to earn a living wage in the private sector. So tell us what you think about the premium credit. Of all the credits, this one makes the most sense because it's not really a tax credit. For all practical purposes, the premium credit is a government-funded voucher payable from appropriations whose purpose is to subsidize health insurance for those with middle and low income. I suspect it's called a non-refundable tax credit because some politicians thought that it sounded better than calling it a government-funded health insurance voucher. So you think that this tax credit is all right because it isn't really a credit? Yes, the politicians identified affordable health insurance as a social problem, enacted the Affordable Care Act to address the need, appropriated funds to implement the program, and used taxpayer-subsidized vouchers to pay for health insurance. That's how I think the system should work. The only involvement of the Affordable Care Act with tax policy is that vouchers are labeled as tax credits. This concludes Part 8.